Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 40 of Inking Out Loud. I'm your host, Rob Santos, and I'm joined by my co-host, Drew McCaffrey.
How's it going, everybody?
And joining us for the first time to discuss the new/old/final Robert Jordan release, Warrior of the Altaii, everyone's favorite booktuber, Mr. Daniel Greene.
Hey, thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being on. Daniel, welcome to the show, man. Welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great to be here.
Yeah. Before we have... Well, no, sorry. Let me back up for a second there. I want to say that before us, we have something incredible to discuss. It's one of the earliest completed works of Robert Jordan, written during the developing stages of an author who eventually became a titan of his genre. So how do we even begin our approach to reviewing something like this? Do we just do what we normally do, Drew, and just kind of like jump straight into style? Like, what is our plan of attack here, fellas?
I think that's a good idea, actually, because this book, especially being an earlier work of Robert Jordan's, there is really a lot to dig into as far as like the craft of his writing goes and how it developed over the years from what we see in this book to the point, when he passed away after writing Knife of Dreams. So, I want to just kind of start out and say I think his writing definitely retains those hallmarks that we all know and love from The Wheel of Time. I mean, do you agree?
Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
I would say yes and no. There's certain like this is faster paced, I feel, than The Wheel of Time ever consistently is.
Oh yeah.
It also is less detail heavy. I mean, and those are two things Robert Jordan is incredibly well known for: slower pacing and attention to detail that turns some off. I love, but some frown at.
Right.
So I think those two things are completely not there. But in terms of the authorial voice communicating, especially the way he handles dialogue, I found to be the most similar.
Yeah, what really stood out to me that felt familiar, felt like coming home in a way, was kind of his turns of phrase. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of specific word choices and like colloquialisms in the world of Warrior of the Altaii that we see carry over into The Wheel of Time. Just specific tendencies that Robert Jordan has with his word choice, I thought was there. And then, of course, there is this sort of snarky... there were multiple points where I found myself actually laughing out loud because I was like, oh man, that is just vintage RJ.
Yeah, his humor is there in spades. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll say that since the book came out on Tuesday of this past week, which turned out to be like a 55-hour work week for me personally, like I had to get through the vast majority of this one on audiobook if I wanted to finish in time for this video. And as much entertainment as they give me while I'm working, it does, I have to say again, it sucks having to listen to a book for my first read. Because I don't feel like I retain anywhere near as much information. That said, I managed to finish about 90% of this book on release day for that exact same reason. It's not... it's not a huge endeavor to get through this book, and with that pace that you guys are talking about, it flew by. It absolutely flew by. But first and foremost on my list of things I want to talk about with the style points here is the elephant in the room. Robert Jordan writing in first person. Like, how cool and unexpected was that?
I hate first person, so it wasn't cool for me, man.
You hate first person? No?
It's my least favorite perspective.
That was not a pleasant surprise?
Not for me. Not for me. I did. It was executed well. I didn't bother me that point. I'm not crazy. I'm not going to throw down a book just because it's first person. But
sure.
Man, I much prefer third person limited. So much more prefer it.
Yeah, I didn't really have too much of a problem with first person. I do tend to fall more in your camp, Daniel, where I prefer a third person limited point of view. But I also feel like this first person choice in Warrior here is tied pretty inextricably to the kind of book we're talking about, and the cultural reading landscape of the time when it was written, where we have these books like Conan the Barbarian, these swords and sorcery, more popcorn reading than epic sprawling fantasies with all kinds of social and cultural commentary and things like that. This is more an adventure story, and it's a very specific type of adventure story targeted, I think, pretty clearly toward like teenage boys.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And the fact that we have a first-person perspective here, and the kind of character that Wulfgar is, provides a pretty blank slate and allows readers, if they want, to step into Wulfgar's shoes, and it can become a real like fantasy, so to speak, for the reader rather than just a fantastic story.
You're saying the way it's written lends a lot to the escapism.
Yes. Oh yeah.
I see. I haven't thought about that, but that's absolutely true.
I hadn't considered that either.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I do agree. This is absolutely a product of its time as well. This reads like 70s fantasy to a T. I would even say it might be a great introduction to 70s fantasies for people, because this is just what it was like at the time. Kind of that awkward transition phase for fantasy where it was going from the classic to the modern, and it was kind of a little disjointed, not quite as well structured, but really different because of that. 70s always stands out to me when reading fantasy.
Yeah.
But there's also, I mean, how many nuggets, like, leading up, like, I don't mean to, I have to do about this because I'm a huge Wheel of Time nerd. I caught so many nuggets of ideas that were later fully realized in Wheel of Time. So many of them.
Yeah. I have an entire section of my notes dedicated just to comparisons where I noticed these little nuggets, as you call them. It was, I would love, I cannot wait to discuss all of these. Because I'm a huge, Drew, of course, both of us being huge Wheel of Time fans as well. There's just so much to be gleaned in this book for those who are already big fans of the Wheel of Time. It's just so much more surreal of an experience for it. Absolutely.
For sure. Before we get into that, though, I do want to touch on one more thing.
No, that's okay, dude.
You're good. There's one more thing that I had written down here about kind of just the writing style and the craft and Robert Jordan's so-called like level as a writer in this book. That I didn't love, and this is a little bit of a callback to our Ruin of Kings episode, Rob, if you remember that. The transitions in this are very abrupt. They're not especially deft. You'll have scenes where like 5 different scenes will happen in one page, essentially, where like the scene that really stood out to me was when they've taken Lanta and Wulfgar's sitting on the throne, and it's just like one random person after another just comes in and has a quick conversation and then leaves, and then another one comes in and like it was the kind of thing that you would never get in a Wheel of Time book.
Yeah, the last third of this book is the weakest, I think, a point of the book. And to me it read like a first draft play where it's like, okay, here's the gist of what's going to happen in the scene. We'll come back and expand on it, and now move on to the next one. It felt like it hadn't been fully realized. It was like the show notes transformed into the actual writing, which that I can understand why I have seen some harsher criticism towards this book than I felt was justified, but I think that's at least understandable. Some of the things that have been levied against it there.
Yeah,
I will admit I haven't read or watched or touched any reviews of Warrior of the Altaii yet, because I didn't want to. I wanted to come in fresh to it, and especially throwing back to Ruin of Kings, where I did read many reviews about that book, both good and bad, and so I think I may have had some preconceived notions going into that, and so with this, especially the important touchstone that this represents for Robert Jordan's career, I really wanted to experience it fresh.
Yeah, I get 100% get that. And I had a really hard time trying to strike a balance of like, am I being too harsh? Am I trying to like pull against being too nice? And I don't know where I'm landing. Like, it's difficult to do that as such a huge fan, to land where you're actually, okay, I'm being objective here. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, Rob, what do you...
Well, I want to touch really briefly, or at least backtrack just briefly to this weaker final third that you're talking about, Daniel, because I totally agree with that. But I want to ask if we think this could be a result of the narrative pacing that we were talking about earlier, because this book, there's not a lot of time to stop and smell the proverbial roses. It's very fast. Things happen and they happen and they happen, right? And as Drew says, a lot of the times perhaps with not, a whole lot of transition in between. But like this final third, or maybe it was like the final quarter of the book. On the audiobook, it was like the final 2 hours, roughly 2.5 hours out of like a 13-hour book, 12-hour book, something like that. It was pretty. it was, I don't want to say hard to listen to, but it was hard to follow, is what I'll say. And I'm thinking this might have been because of that momentum that I had earlier in the book. The end of the book kind of felt like it was just staggering, like it wasn't quite sure where to land. Well, no, it actually had a very strong landing. Let me take that particular bit back. But just this last 25% of the book, I mean, for me personally, I had loud machines all around, steel hammers swinging, coworkers interrupting. But despite all of that, despite going back and listening again and again and again, it just still kind of feels disjointed and frenzied. So this final, major portion of the book, like, how did you guys feel it was comprehensively understood in relation to like the first 2/3 of this book?
I don't want to come across snobby at all. I'm a big fan of audiobooks. I'm not trying to put down audiobooks at all, but I feel like reading it might have helped a bit just because there are physical breaks. You can see, okay, now we're jumping to another perspective. Now we're jumping to another perspective. Not perspective, another scene. And that could help.
No, you totally nailed it, dude.
Yeah, because Michael, I assume it's Michael Kramer, going through, it's going to be jarring, I imagine, to have just a 2-second pause, and now it's a new scene, and you're not signified as a reader in any way that now you're in a new scene. I shouldn't have said perspective. This is a one-perspective book from beginning to end.
Yeah. Although it does pop out into omniscient a little bit at points, which I found pretty interesting. But as for me, I agree with you, Rob, and I did read this. I don't do audiobooks myself, but even with that, especially that like last couple of chapters there, where we had this sort of simultaneous narrative going with the the funeral pyres at the Great Ravine and this ceremony in Lanta where Bohemund is sending out the messengers, where it kept kind of like flip-flopping, and I at first I was like, wait, where is it? Oh, it's a retrospect, and I was like, oh, okay. But it took me a few paragraphs there to really realize what he was doing there, and I can't imagine what that must have been like on audio. Yeah, because I had to stop and go back to reread. Are you getting the? Daniel's holding up the page.
There is a level of scene breakage happening in these 2 pages that is unprecedented in my mind. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scenes in 2 pages. Which that's one of the few that's a problem with the book things. I don't mean to come down too harshly. I actually did enjoy this book, but there's one in there that's 3 lines, and that's a scene.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly what I was thinking of.
This is one of the drawbacks that I've talked about this a lot before in previous episodes. Up to episode 40 we are now. Listening on audiobook, it's great, it's entertaining, but I would never ever recommend it as a first listen. It is a bad idea and should only ever be done if you are really really stressed for time and trying to get something out of the way so you can discuss it. But like going forward, I mean, I did buy the ebook version. It's actually next to me. I was just, searching through that one, making sure I was pronouncing the names right and stuff like that. I typically do that even if I don't have the physical. And from here on out, nothing but text. Definitely.
Except like when we do something like the Acts of Cain, where the books.
Oh no, sorry, I meant specifically with this book. From every future reading of this book will probably be done on text, or at least it has to be done next, because as an audiobook, it was pretty confusing near the end, for sure.
Yeah. But so I have kind of just one last sort of style, but just general writing point, and that's to the actual content of this book, the subject matter, and it is. As we said, it's a product of its time, but I just, you gotta point out the elephant in the room here. Like, is it really that, like, I feel like there are more pages where women are not wearing clothes than when they are wearing clothes in this book.
Yeah,
like every single
scene. It's the product of a younger male
Robert Jordan. Well, as I watched, Daniel, I watched actually your review of this book just before we went live here, and you called it a book a bit out of its time. And I absolutely 150% agree with that. If this book had been released nearer to the time it was written, I think it would have made a much, it would have had a bigger effect, or at least been appreciated better than a whole bunch of Wheel of Time nerds who are just reading it and like, oh my god, this is so cool. This is his first book, right? But with what you're talking about there, just Drew. Sorry, go ahead, Craig. I didn't want to. Jesus Christ, Craig.
Hi,
Daniel.
Craig.
Oh my goodness.
No,
Daniel,
fine.
please continue with your point there.
No, I just wanted to say absolutely. But I don't think you and I are, when we're saying that, are saying it's a bad book. We're just saying, as someone who appreciates the evolution of fantasy, it does feel like a big step back. And not a back and isn't we're digressing to a worse time in fantasy, just a different, just, this is the time of sword and sorcery, as you said, the time of, the people who did a lot of acid in the 60s now turning around and writing fantasy.
Yeah,
I can see that.
It's pulp. It's pulp fantasy.
Yeah. I would say this elevates a little bit above pulp. It's a step above pulp.
Yeah, that's fair.
There's enough
there are some
world and
interesting
culture,
Yeah, there's some interesting themes that he brings in that aren't usually present in pulp fantasy, but it has the trappings of it for sure. And yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I just started laughing when Mayra enters a scene and 2 sentences later her robes are puddled around her feet, and I'm like, oh man.
Yeah. I want to talk about Wulfgar as a character. Do you guys have anything else, style-wise, you want to discuss before we jump into our characters, or maybe just character? The only person I really have to talk about from this book is Wulfgar himself.
Well, there's a tinge of a sci-fi element here. Is that worth discussing? Do you think in depth? Because there's a sci-fi
you're talking
element
about the Wanderers.
Well, that just popped
sure.
their head.
So I feel like if we're going to talk about this, we have to start talking about and bring in these Wheel of Time
that's
crossovers, because this is maybe the most obvious thematic similarity with the parallel worlds. And
for those who are not aware and have not read Wheel of Time, there are heavy sci-fi elements prevalent in the Wheel of Time, hidden through apocalypse, things like that exist. The Age of Legends is futuristic, and so therefore that exists, and we're seeing a shadow of what's to come, pun intended, within the Warrior of the Altaii here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the Most High and the Wanderers both have clear they were clear inspirations for aspects of the Age of Legends and of the mirror worlds and the parallel worlds in the Wheel of Time. And I even got, with the runners, a real Grolm kind of sense from them.
Okay.
With these these creatures that have been pulled from another world in, and of course the fact that, anyway, never mind, we'll talk about that later, but but I do find it interesting how even back at the very beginning Robert Jordan was interested in blending these themes of science fiction and fantasy. So
yeah, no, how cool was that scene where Wulfgar got to interrogate the Most High? What was his name? Chasen? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I only heard it on the audiobook, but that whole scene, I just gobbled that up like a steak. I was just, more, and then it ended, and I was like, oh. Right? That was pretty cool.
Very Wizard of Oz-esque. He's got like the voice box and like the 3-finger gloves, and I'm like, oh, it's all stage trickery,
Yeah.
But on that topic though, with Wulfgar and how do you guys feel like he was as a driver for this book? Because he is our only point of view character.
Daniel?
Okay, I'm going to say something controversial. So in terms of like a well-realized character, I have a spectrum in my head. There's the Edward Cullen to Glatka spectrum, where it's complete blank slate that you just put yourself on and there's no character there at all at one end. And on the other end, this is a person. So it's Edward Cullen to Glatka.
Edward Cullen, okay. I want to make sure I heard that name right. Yeah, go ahead.
So, and if you don't know which end is which in terms of the rating system, you've got a problem as a reader. But I found this to be...
I'm going to drink to that.
I wouldn't say Wulfgar is the most personality-filled character of all time. He's got nice elements to him. There's things that are certainly there. He has a personality, but not worth writing pages and pages dissecting and trying to figure out. There's not the nuance that you'll later see in the Wheel of Time emerge.
Yep, I fully agree, and I was kind of trying to put it into words, and I didn't have the chance to really look this up because I'm sure there's like a TV tropes page about this this trope. But if a Mary Sue is an idealized author self-insert, Wulfgar is supposed to be an idealized reader self-insert.
Yeah, he's a Doc Savage type. He just walks that
Yeah.
line. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would say more character than Doc Savage, but not by leaps and bounds.
Yeah, yeah. He definitely, on that spectrum you brought up, Daniel, he definitely falls much closer to the Edward Cullen end than any kind of character like Glocta or Kane for you, Rob, or, you know, one of these characters who's just so rich and so vividly realized on the page that you know them like you know another human being.
Precisely, yeah. Which, you know, that's just, again, one of those elements from the era, I feel like, picking up its head. I mean, that was something that was typical at the time. You know, you don't see characters that are meant to be so relatable or so deep become the popular choice for a little bit longer. I feel like that really became more prevalent in the 80s and 90s, and we're seeing it, you know, now it's a must. Now your book is not reviewed well unless your character is well realized and a real person with flaws and anxiety and stuff like that.
Yeah, because Wolfgar really only has one flaw in this book, and that is his insistence on keeping the Altaii the same, resisting change, you know? But in terms of the actual like conflict of the story, that doesn't get explored much until the very end. Yeah. So,
in terms of characters with like, I mean, he's a big dude who's very good at what he does, but he might have one of the highest kill counts in terms of just murdering people. I've come across it in a while for a non-magical character,
especially for a debut novel. Like, holy crap. Like Wolfgar, I didn't realize until we actually got Wolfgar that like a small part of me unconsciously had been concerned that we'd have another young, naive, awkward teenage character upon whom this whole story would perhaps hinge. Not that I have any problems with Randall Thor, easily top tier best fantasy characters ever. But man, it was just so cool to get someone like this instead, I thought. Like, not only is Wolfgar a full-grown man, but he's already a consummate warrior, he's an experienced tactician, and more importantly, he's already a respected leader. You know, I thought it was a really, really ballsy choice for Robert Jordan, you know, who at the time was a relatively inexperienced writer himself, to have a character this strong and confident and more importantly, competent. You know, I thought he really ran the risk of restricting that character growth, if that's a theme that you're going for. I'm not sure if he was even at all, because if I take a step back, I don't think Wolfgar did much character growing at all. I guess that's like my question for you. Like, was there any character growth in Wolfgar, or would it even have been necessary for this particular story?
I would have been a lot harsher on that if he had chosen to have a young kid who's like thrown into the world type character, because Wolfgar doesn't grow or change. But because he chose to have a competent, skilled, experienced leader, I didn't mind it. In fact, it would have felt strange to me to have this guy go through this amazing arc in a small book. I mean, you can burn through this book in a day if you try really hard. It would have been strange to have that turnaround. It would have been strange to have this guy like completely change who he is and not entirely believable. So I think it fits with the choices made for the text, where he changes a little bit, but he's not a whole new person by the end.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And I have a question kind of for both of you guys that's attached to that. And that is, do you think had history gone a little differently, do you think Robert Jordan wanted to write a sequel to this?
It read to me as if he did the whole way through and just decided perhaps near the end he just, you know what, maybe I'll end it here. But this is, again, very brief. Yeah.
If I have to do a whole lot of speculation, and I don't know what I'm talking about in general, so take this with a massive grain of salt. Based off what I read in the forward at the beginning, and the fact that the end of this book is so just like, let's get it done, I feel like he initially set out to write maybe a trilogy, maybe a bigger book, but it's so just let's get it done. I feel like he got near the end and he just got like, okay, this isn't where I want to put my passion. This isn't the kickoff point I want for my series. And so he kind of wrapped it up and then realized, okay, this is a good book. Let's try to get it published. And then from there, I can go and work on my Conan, my Wheel of Time, my what have you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got the feeling that perhaps the Wanderers had a larger part yet to play, and perhaps there was going to be a bigger struggle on that front or something, you know, along those lines. So yeah, I think that's what gave me the impression.
I thought with how it was left open with Brecken and Sayin at the end there, that was a very obvious, easy jumping point for a sequel, and also the fact that there's a pretty expansive map included in this, and we didn't touch like
was there
80% of that map.
Oh, I missed it.
Yeah. Well, okay, that map. I tried so hard to justify that map being Shara. I was like, it's Shara. This gonna be a Shara story. We're gonna get into Shara.
Really?
No.
Oh, that would be cool.
Oh, I know.
Have like the backbone of the world be like the Cliffs of Dawn on the far side of the Isle West.
Yeah, there's your map, and it's flipped.
Oh.
So if you, I was so ready for that to be Shara.
Oh.
But no.
Yep. Yeah.
If only.
I just had that thought pop in when I got to the end of the book, and how rushed it felt, and how open-ended it was left. I thought there was a lot of potential for a sequel there, and I feel like Robert Jordan had to have had some intent built in when he wrote this book. But
that's fair. That's fair.
But as far as sticking to characters, though, to kind of reel it back to where we were with Wolfgar, I want to talk about, oh my gosh, I just totally blanked. Mayra? Yeah, that's her name, right?
I think
that's how it's pronounced in the audio.
I said it Mira, but I'm dyslexic, so completely.
How is it spelled? I still don't know how it's spelled.
Mayra, right?
Okay, that's exactly how I spelled it. Look at me.
I just like totally blanked, just completely brain farted. But
at least you didn't call Daniel Craig.
I think we have an interesting character here, even if she does spend most of this book naked. She's definitely... Well, the Sisters of Wisdom in general are a clear progenitor for the Aes Sedai.
Yes. And the culture of Wolfgar's people is clearly a precursor for the Aiel. I mean...
Oh, yeah.
The Wise Sisters, yes.
Yeah. So, but with Mayra, I felt like there was a little bit of a trap there for me as a Wheel of Time reader, where I wanted her to be Moiraine. And she had... You know, there were like a few things in there about her personality that were reminiscent of Moiraine, but she was not at all the same kind of character. So when she made her first appearance, I was like, okay, I know where this is going. I know what's going to happen with her. And then I was just way wrong. You know?
Wrong enough.
But did you guys also find yourself like trying to assign characters from this to Wheel of Time characters?
Oh, how could you not?
I didn't. I don't think I did. No? I think I was too busy with world elements, because I just did the other side of it, where I was like trying to, okay, there's the clear connection that women use magic and men don't. Well, okay, like there's that right there.
Yeah.
There's the spine of the world. It basically exists in this book. It's just called something else. There's things like that where I was just looking for those. In terms of character, it read so different character-wise for me that I don't think I made any connections, really.
Okay. Yeah, because by the time I finished the book, I had kind of abandoned that. Mm-hmm. But when I started, I was definitely looking for those connections to make, and then they just weren't there as much as I thought they would be. But you're right, Daniel. It was much more the world-building aspects that were like, oh yeah, this was the foundation, the creative foundation for the Wheel of Time. I mean, things like Lanta, just the city of Lanta and the layout. I was like, oh, like Camelin.
Yeah. Well, the throne,
the low town and the high city. Yeah,
it's passed down from queen to daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
We even certain themes are carried over. We have this theme of prophecy and potential salvation. Right, as long as everything goes according to plan. We have even just some scenes themselves that kind of play out very familiarly. You know, for example, Wolfgar in the palace of Lanta after he's taken it. The city, and he's addressing like all these cowering nobles while his like barbarian warriors are blocking the exits and they're lining the walls and stuff like that. You know, like there was definitely just so much to be gleaned for hardcore Wheel of Time fans to dive in there. But like just to just get that look at these notions that had just started to plant themselves in his head at this time is just again, I'll say it's surreal, absolutely surreal.
And of course, they're not as well realized as they later would be. They're not as well fleshed out. But I still think, you know, even as a non-Wheel of Time fan, you can appreciate them. You know, if someone hasn't read Watt and they want to get into this, they're still not poorly handled by any stretch of the imagination. I I think you guys might disagree with me on this one because I might be crazy, but I felt like one of the strongest similarities between this and Watt was the way the atmosphere of the story read. To me, it felt very Wheel of Time, and just the way the book made me feel, as I put myself in the setting. Maybe it was a combination of his dialogue and the way he would describe things, but it just made me feel, okay, if someone handed me this and didn't tell me it was Robert Jordan, I would still think this is someone who was influenced by his writing style significantly in that way, where it felt, like the world felt similar in the feeling of it. And I don't know what a better way to put that to words is outside of that.
100%. I completely agree with you there. While the writing may not have been as polished as we were used to with the Heights, the Wheel of Time hit, it really was a sense of familiarity reading this book, where you're like, you can tell this is Robert Jordan. Mm-hmm. It's something in the way he constructs like the flow of his narrative. Mm-hmm. That even though this is much faster paced than the Wheel of Time, it's still the same familiar progression through scenes and through plot overall that makes it very easy to read. Mm-hmm. It's again going back to what I mentioned earlier, like the word choices. It's these little idioms and colloquialisms that he throws in to help enrich the world. It's the humor woven in both in the dialogue and in the narration, and the way Robert Jordan can build really powerfully emotional scenes. Even in this, there were a couple of scenes that were very touching.
Yeah,
and then he was also capable of taking that powerful scene and breaking the tension with some humor. I mean, there was one line. It was with it's when he comes back. He gets back from breaking out of Lanta, and he meets Bartu outside the camp.
I love that scene.
And Bartu, there's this moment of reunion, and he says, "It's me, Bartu, alive, if somewhat the worse for wear and in need of a bath." And then there was moisture in his eyes, and in mine also. But then there was a lot of dust in the air.
Yeah. That is such you can see that exact same thought coming out of somebody's like Perrin or somebody like Matt, for example.
Yeah.
The sense of humor rung true, all the way through. And I did like there was a consistent theme of like manly men in this book suppressing like their like emotions and being like, yeah, brother, right? Like I'm not hurt by this. that same theme occurred repeatedly, where it's I don't feel emotions right now.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see his touch. I can see Robert Jordan's fingerprints all over this book. But I will admit that I don't know if I'd have been able to draw that correlation unless I was told to look out for it, or unless I went into it knowing that this was a Robert Jordan book. And I don't know if that's maybe perhaps, I don't want to say lack of experience. I've read The Wheel of Time not 100 times, but at least a couple dozen times all the way through. Like, I don't know.
That's fair, man. Everyone gleams different things. It's a completely
going
subjective.
into it, knowing it's Robert Jordan book, I knew what to look for, and therefore I was able to find it. But if someone had just handed me this book and said, "Hey, does this remind you of anybody?" I'm not sure if Robert Jordan would have been the first name on my list.
Oh, okay.
So that's completely fair, and you might be totally right that my bias of knowing puts all that in there. I'm 100% willing to admit that.
It could be, or it could, who knows? I'm sure. I also want to know from our listeners if they have a similar, reaction like mine, or like perhaps like Daniel's and Drew's.
Yeah, definitely. Check out our Facebook page. Join in the conversation there. Let us know what you thought about Robert Jordan's writing style in this book, and if you think it, rang true to the Wheel of Time or not.
If you would have been able to tell it was Robert Jordan, not knowing beforehand. Yeah.
I have to ask, just purely as an audio nerd, was Michael Kramer's narration as good as ever?
So good. And the fact that we're, previously before this, we were just covering The Fires of Heaven. At that point, Kramer would have been recording that probably in the mid-90s.
94?
Yeah, well, the book was released in 94, but were audiobooks, released alongside the books, do we know?
Actually, I have no idea.
Yeah, that's why I left some room there.
Yeah, I was 4 years old. I was
3, yeah. So, but going back and listening to the earlier Michael Kramer books, like in the Wheel of Time series, and listening to the later ones, the way his voice changes and just becomes so much deeper and more gravelly, and it has so much more earth and depth to it. Listening to a Robert Jordan book with Michael Kramer's later voice, oh my god, it was so well done. Again, Michael Kramer's a legend. Like, he's just one of the best audiobook narrators out there.
So how was his delivery on that scene, the first scene in Lanta when Wolfgar goes before the Twin Queens and he has his proclamation?
Yeah, and he's talking about the wall hangings, and he's talking about taking them slaves and stuff. Wolfgar is Kramer gives Wolfgar the voice that Wolfgar needs. It's just, I wouldn't change a thing.
There's no faster way for me to bump a fantasy work up my TBR list than having Michael Kramer and Kate Redding on it together. Like, I love the way they capture stories so well, either one of them or together. I will read a book or listen to it specifically because I see they are involved.
Yeah, confession.
Wow.
When I was looking for Warrior of the Altaii, like the night before at midnight, when I was gonna download and listen to it at work the next day, I was like, please be Michael Kramer, please be Michael Kramer, please be Michael Kramer. And I saw it, and I just kind of clapped, and I was like, yes, good, all right, this is gonna be good.
Oh man, yeah, I have to admit, that experience is foreign to me because I don't do audiobooks, but there's always a sort of academic interest in that I have, because as a writer myself and as somebody who has done public readings of my own work, I have an appreciation for how difficult it can be to properly deliver prose in a spoken setting. And I know I read books with a certain cadence and a certain rhythm, and I have my interpretation of what I think the author was trying to do with those, the construction of those sentences. And so whenever I come across a particular passage or a really cool line or something, I always wonder, I'm like, what is the audiobook like for this? Is it like how I'm reading it, or is there another interpretation here? And so that's one of the things that I find fascinating about audiobook listeners versus book readers versus people who do both. Mm-hmm. Because how much does that audiobook interpretation impact how you end up reading when you sit down with the physical book or an ebook?
It's really good that you bring this up, because at the end of every single Wheel of Time audiobook, there is that interview with Robert Jordan. And in that interview, he is asked, do you read your own books? And he says, no, but I listen to my own books because I want to know if I said what I think I said. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up, Drew.
See, I am a very read things however you want to read them, I don't care person. So if someone wants to do ebooks, physical, hardback, paperback, audio, if they want to slam their head into it and to get the information in somehow, I don't care. But I 100% believe. I'm finishing up narrating my first paid audiobook. I've started doing that, and it's an adventure.
Cool.
And I can tell you as someone who's starting now, it is so hard. It is.
I can believe it.
Really, really hard. And for people like Michael Kramer, who have been doing it for so long and are clearly so meticulous and fill every character with such personality, it's massive respect.
He has 50 different voices, doesn't he? How does he do that?
He's like one of the Simpsons actors who just pulls out 100 different people. Like, it's truly remarkable. Yeah. And I do believe a great audiobook performance can elevate and change a story, whether or not changing it's good or bad. I mean, I think like Lord of the Rings you need to read. You know what I mean? There's things like that where it's
sure.
But yeah, listening to audiobook later on, but reading Lord of the Rings is like a spiritual experience for every fantasy fan you need to do. Mm-hmm. But I don't bash audiobooks because I do appreciate the art of narration on such a great level.
While audiobooks don't do it for me, they tend to be frustrating. I read a certain way. I read very quickly, and it's like when I get in the zone, I'll comprehend 2 lines of text at once. So I'm not reading word by word, which is how audiobooks by nature you have to listen word by word. And so you can only speak so quickly, and if you crank up that 1.5, 2 times speed, I think that takes away from it, because then you lose like the rhythm and the inflection and the narration, you know,
Delivery
and
suffers.
And so audiobooks tend to just be painfully slow. Like Rob, you said Warrior of the Altaii was like 13 hours, 12 hours?
I have it right here. Warrior of the Altaii as an audiobook is precisely 9 hours 29 minutes. Whoa, I overestimated it.
9 hours. Oh, okay, 9.5 hours. Okay, but so I read this book in like a little over 3 hours.
Yeah. Wow. Are you shitting? Wow, are you serious?
You have a superpower. We need to discuss that.
This guy reads at an inhuman pace. I've been saying it, and I will continue to say it.
If I hadn't been sitting here having a detailed discussion with you about this book, and you told me, I read it in 3 hours, I would be like, I'm not going to talk about this book with you because you clearly didn't actually read it.
Yeah.
But now I know you know what you're talking about, so I believe you. And
then it's clear that not only he read it, he appreciates it too.
Yeah.
Like, he actually absorbed it. He retained the book. It's a superpower that you have, Drew. Myself, with audiobooks, the main reason I listen to them is because I get to listen to books at work, and when I'm working and I'm welding 11 hours a day, it's very, very boring. So being able to listen to the dulcet tones of Michael Kramer, and as he's just delivering 8 different characters at once in one scene, and somehow, even without telling you, like when the narrative doesn't tell you which character is speaking at any given moment, you can still tell which character is doing the speaking, because Michael Kramer has such a distinct way of delivering everybody in these books. But be it like the Stormlight Archive, the Wheel of Time, even Mistborn, and now with Warrior of the Altaii, like these are of course all the Michael Kramer books that I've listened to. Phenomenal. Like even as somebody who wants to who someday wants to do some bit of voice acting, or somebody who it's a case study every time he has something new to offer. Michael Kramer, 100%.
Now, I do want to pull the conversation a little bit away from this, because something was mentioned. If you don't mind, I apologize, but
go for it.
Go for it, dude. It's a podcast, not a lecture.
So this is going to be the most shallow question ever, but I want to ask, because Robert Jordan, there's a lot of debate about this topic with Jordan books. How do you feel about the cover of this one?
The cover?
The cover.
Oh.
It's pretty in terms of color.
It's fine. It's pretty bland. Okay. I feel like the cover, so I'll also say this. I do think the choice behind, like the decision making behind the cover art for this, is tied into the kind of work this is, which is an unpolished work.
Okay.
Right? This is not a book that has gone through like extensive, rigorous editing to prepare it for publishing, right? Like we didn't get like rounds of revisions with Robert Jordan after they made the decision, yes, we're going to publish this. And so I think this sort of minimalist cover that they chose for it is reflective of that. And I can appreciate, I mean, that's my conjecture. I may be wrong, and but if that is the case, I can appreciate the decision making behind that.
I agree with that to an extent. I also think it was chosen to be minimalist so his name would stand out as much as possible, because you're trying you sell on the author in this case quite a bit. Especially if you look at the spine, it's quite literally Robert Jordan, Warrior of the Altaii. So there's a bit of that to an extent. There's just the Wheel of Time covers infamously have been memed to this point in the fantasy community and things like that. But to me, I am partial to minimalist covers. I like them. So to me, I would go as far as to say I like this more than even the new Wheel of Time covers in some cases. Not all of them, because some of the new Wheel of Time covers are fantastic. But
the ebook covers?
Yeah, the ebook covers. And there's also the new run, which is just the minimal Wheel of Time logo kind of repositioned and differently colored.
Right.
I like discussing the artwork of a book cover and how people interpret it. And I think you were right on, where this is a minimal one, and it's supposed to be seen as this is a thing for fans, a road for fans to go down, and that's what this is presented as. That's why Robert Jordan is larger than the title of the book on the spine, and equally large on the front. So that's just my little aside there. I'm a nerd for a lot of things, and books. I judge books by their covers. Damn it.
Ooh, so we actually don't talk about cover art too much on this, although usually I only really we certainly did with Heroes Die, because that is the worst cover of all time. Well, maybe second worst after that one Dune book, God Emperor of Dune, with like the if you're curious, go look up the cover of that book. It's horrific. But
I haven't seen the cover of that one.
But I know for sure that when we get to the Black Company, we'll be discussing the cover art, because Daniel, like you just said, I read the Black Company purely because I judged books by their covers, and I saw the cover of the second Black Company compendium, The Books of the South, and it is to this day the most amazing book cover I've ever seen. I saw it, I was like, well, I am reading the crap out of that, and I went and bought the first book and read it and loved it, and it was history from there. But and that's so that cover artist is Raymond Swanland. He actually did the Towers of Midnight Wheel of Time ebook cover with Perrin forging the hammer.
Oh my god, that is such a fantastic piece of art.
That's the second best Wheel of Time cover.
With the eyes shining and the sparks flying everywhere. Perrin looks like Schwarzenegger. Oh my god.
And the wolf in the flames. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
as somebody who just had went through the audiobook this time, and I do have the e-reader version now, but of course it's all in monochrome, just like dry ink on the front. I haven't been able to really appreciate what this book looks like to feel and hold. But I can say I do really I'm really digging that red and black gradient. That just it's something about that color scheme. It just does it for me. That is an eye catcher for me. I would zero right in on that if I was in a bookstore.
Sorry,
go ahead.
So I was just saying, I do think that color choice was also great, because this is a book of like blood and shadow, right? There's so much gore. and the climactic battle is taking place under these black clouds, and so especially with like the fading black, we have the black around the top and bottom, and then it fades into this red with the stark black. It's a very violently colored cover.
Yeah.
Which fits with the book.
As someone who is a bit of a bookshelf fanatic, someone who likes making their bookshelf look pretty, I can say this one does look good right before or after all your Wheel of Time books, being like, hey, here's a little bookend, here's a little aside. You know what I mean? Here's a little Robert Jordan bookend.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't actually put my book on my shelf yet, so I haven't had a chance to look at that.
All right, thank you for putting up my snobbery. That's all I wanted to.
No, that's great. This is one of the things we like having guests on the podcast, because we tend to sort of get in certain rhythms, and we discuss more or less the same topics each time, and it's nice to get an outsider perspective and bring in something that we don't talk about a lot.
Okay. I like being brought out of that rut. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you for indulging me, and I'm glad you liked it.
But on that note, I feel like we're kind of closing in on what we have to say here. But I wanted to ask you guys if you have 3 favorite scenes for the book.
Yes, I do. Did we tell Daniel to prepare for this?
You want to kick it off?
I was not told to prepare for this. Was I? Maybe I was. I don't know.
No, you were not. I kept this one in on my sleeve.
3 favorite scenes. Come to me last. I will.
I was going to say we can go back to you afterwards if you'd like. Yeah. Okay. Drew, you want to give us our first 3, since you were the one who wanted to ambush our special guest with that one.
Yeah. So I've already mentioned one of my favorite scenes, and that was Wulfgar coming before the Twin Queens and making his statements of doom for Lanta, and just being like a completely cocksure and refusing to be condescended to. But my second favorite scene had to have been that final battle at the ravine. I loved the descriptions of the formations. I thought that was as far as like a huge battle goes, that was a great description. That's up there with some of the best battle descriptions in the Wheel of Time. I mean, you can clearly tell from the get-go, Robert Jordan has a grasp on military tactics. But my favorite scene in the book, maybe it's more of a sequence, was Wulfgar in the old cell. Whoa. And the description of his torture in the dark with the grinding plates below the floor and the floor pulling out and these unknown reptilian things and this, I mean, just horrific torture that he's going through, the mental torture more so than the physical. Of course, he's being starved and all that, but it's the mentality that he develops in there about this not fear of death, but fear of this ignominious death among these whatever slithering things that he's afraid of.
Yeah.
I loved that. I thought that was the best bit of writing in the whole book.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So my 3, I'll start with number 1. It will be Wulfgar's sort of idle, spur-of-the-moment eulogy of that young warrior named Rolf, I think it was.
Yeah.
Who died in his place as Wulfgar was attacked by the assassin. And it was what he said about Rolf that really got to me. He said, and I quote, "He had 3 kinds of courage. The kind that makes a man brave in battle, the kind that makes a man say or do the thing that must be said or done, and the kind that makes a man do what other men say can't be done." That was just a beautifully written line, that or eulogy, whatever you want to call it. And I did get chills in that moment. I was like, wow, like this here is where the writer that Robert Jordan is going to be is already starting to peek through. In that scene
so with that particular scene, I very much felt echoes of Heath Tower from the prologue of
in
Towers of Midnight.
Yeah, sweet.
See,
I do like that.
To me, those are the kind of lines that are written by someone who had military service, which Robert Jordan did. Like, that's where that kind of experience shows through, where you're able to tell this guy, he knows what he's talking about when it comes to what makes, someone brave, what makes someone a soldier.
Yeah. He's seen the beast.
Yeah.
For sure. My second favorite scene would be during Wulfgar's escape from Lanta, as he finds, and I'm going to get this name wrong, I'm certain, Hulagai? Hulogai is how I spelled it.
The guy who was impaled. Yeah.
Yeah. When he finds his like this warrior near death from torture and learns the fate of the rest of his warriors. First off, that scene, gorgeous. It was macabre, but it was beautifully written. And Wulfgar's revenge as he's plotting how to reach, and I'm going to get her name wrong too. Alana,
yeah.
Yeah. He's looking up.
Elana.
Elana.
I did Alana, but I'm not sure.
I just put 2 L's in that, but other than that, I nailed it. Sweet. He's looking up at the climb, and he's thinking, there were no low walls with guards, only towering carved walls. Up 4 floors in the dark to get to her. It could have been a set of stairs. Oh my God, what a line. His sentence level prose is already showing those moments of sheer brilliance. And number 3, to wrap it up, it was just a moment when the Marasa tosses that bundle towards Wulfgar near the end, and it unravels, and we find out it's holding Harold's head. There was something so visceral in the response that we got from Wulfgar that we hadn't seen before up to this point. This sheer loss of control, this burning rage. Up to this point, as you were saying about him earlier, Drew, like he's chill as a cucumber. This guy, you can't get to me. But damn, somebody finally did.
I will also point out with that scene, and this is part of why it was one of my favorites as well, was the description of their charge.
Yeah.
They were silent.
Yeah, that bloodlust or blood drunk. He's just.
They were so angry that they were all silent.
Dark, but perfectly written. Perfectly written. So yeah, those are my 3 favorites.
Okay.
All right. I don't have quotes ready, so apologize for that.
That's okay, man.
Yeah, no.
We ambushed you with this one.
It's all good. It's all good. I think my 3 favorite scenes, off the top of my head, one would be the showcasing of magic early on, where the let's call them World Hopper, Cosmere, was all of a sudden forced to be translated, where basically their language was stripped from them. I loved that. I've seen sci-fi handle language barriers a lot of times, but seeing one in fantasy so aggressively handled was pretty neat. It was different, and it stuck out to me as just magic can be used to fix language barriers, and that's not elaborated much on, but it can, and it's pretty cool. I like that kind of stuff. I wish the magic system had been more expanded on, but in how many pages? Sub 400 page book.
Yeah, it's like 394 or something like that. Yeah,
it's not going to be done. I also really liked an odd scene to like on this level, but to me it made the character of Wulfgar much more interesting. and that's where he's made to essentially grovel for food, and he does. Instead of doing the typical trope of no, I'll refuse to eat, he does eat.
Yes!
Which I think made him a much more relatable person, someone who still proved he was not broken and smarter than the people dealing with him in a not entirely Mary Sue way, because the Mary Sue way would be, no, I'm just not going to eat, and I'll still be strong enough later on to deal with stuff. No, he ate because he was willing to give in, and he was still plotting. That was great.
And I liked his, like, justification for doing so in, like, within his honor system.
Yeah.
Where he's saying, it's not dishonorable for me to grovel. What would be dishonorable is to give up, or to let my pride overwhelm me. And he drew this line between pride and honor, and I really appreciated that.
That's a way to
honor
make me like
context.
someone on that level. Yeah, because it's so frustrating when a character won't do the obviously smarter choice because the author wants them to be, you know, they'll never break. And it's like, come on. Anyone, if they have to eat for 4 days, I'll do some sick stuff for food if you don't eat, if I skip a meal. So, and I think the last thing would be... final scene, I had it in my head, and it's now gone. Give me a second. It'll come back. It's like a sneeze. I just got to get it out.
It's all right. I did that with Mayra's name earlier.
I think my final pick would be... well, it's going to be more of a general thing, and that's the way Robert Jordan handled combat in this one. Because we didn't get Cat crosses the courtyard. We didn't get things like that. Instead, we got a very glossing over at times, but still having impactful moments with combat, where it would be like, okay, he fights these 5 guys, we're not going to go into detail every one, but then it would like refocus in on pivotal moments, and I thought that was an interesting way to handle combat, and I like that Robert did it that way, where it kind of fluctuates in and out of detail depending on what's important. And I honestly was going into this expecting to hear barbarian sword forms, so it was a nice little change about
I'm
there.
really glad that we didn't, Sweet.
Okay.
So?
Well, so I think before we move into the final draft, do we just have any kind of wrapping up points, final thoughts we want to cover?
I do. I have one. I just wanted to say that, you know, all in all, point of view aside, it was pretty much exactly what I expected out of the story. You know, it was a solid story, if not quite up to his later standard, written by a man who would go on to change the entire landscape of epic fantasy. Or, like, as I said earlier, I watched your review on this book on YouTube, and you called it a book out of its time. 150% agreed. And that said, looked at for what it is, it was surreal reading it from beginning to end, and I'm glad that we did get that one final work from the man who was James Oliver Rigney Jr. Hats off.
Agree.
Okay. So yeah, I have a couple of quick points. One of them, I think in a lot of ways, I agree with you, Rob. It was the book I expected, and maybe this is simply an indictment on my lack of experience with books from this time. I was not expecting such overt, like, sexual content.
Right.
While Robert Jordan didn't have anything like, you know, the infamous, like, George R.R. Martin scenes, you know, with, like, blow-by-blow descriptions of what's going on in that bed, there were still some pretty shockingly sexual, like, I mean, that scene where Wolfgar is, like, pulled out of, you know, he's, like, bathed and brought up to Alana's chambers, and, yeah, like, whoa, I was not expecting that. And so that took me aback a little bit, and I do think that's a weakness in this book, how prevalent the like, unadulterated male gaze is. The number 100%. Of scenes, obviously, you know, where there are just naked women left and right, and the descriptions, constant descriptions of their breasts, you know, and how whenever they're, like, painting these runes on it, it's always swirls around the breasts and things like that. I was like, okay. Well, maybe I don't need to read more fantasy from the 70s if this is...
Yeah, fair enough.
But despite that, and despite what I mentioned earlier about my issues with some of the, you know, the, like, craft level things with, like, transitions and whatnot, I do still think this is a very solid book. I was happy with the quality of it. I wasn't sure what to expect going in. I was worried that it was going to be very raw, that it was going to be, something that's like, that would kind of mar my memory of Robert Jordan, if that makes sense. And coming out the other side, that was not at all the case. In fact, I have more of an appreciation, and I think it's clear just how talented this man was when it came to writing a story.
Yeah, it's seeing someone with a whole lot of potential who's still solid, but you see how good they're gonna go. There's this. I've said seeds so many times in this. You know what I mean? Those seeds are there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So Daniel, do you have any?
Not. I think we did a good job. We tore it apart in a good way.
Yeah.
Right, then
great.
let's head into the final draft.
Sure.
Rob, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I can kick us off. So at the time of this recording, that being October 3rd, this is the 13th today, right? I didn't actually look that up.
It is.
Sweet. Okay, good. It's actually Thanksgiving here in the Great White North.
Oh, snap.
The obligatory suck it Americans, we get Turkey Day in October, right? And in keeping with that theme, like last week, for example, I brought to the table another contestant in my search for a worthy pumpkin ale. This one is from Great Lakes Brewery here in Ontario, and it claims to be a handcrafted beer with your usual autumn spices, which are cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, allspice, and of course, added pumpkin, which I only recently found out is not really a flavor. It's a flavor, but have you ever actually tasted a pumpkin? It's disgusting.
Yeah.
So, with the pumpkin spices listed, this beer was, I was going to say also disgusting, but no, it wasn't actually that bad. I had it in the freezer before we started the podcast, so it was pleasantly cold this time around instead of drinking it warm. But this was hands down a much better pumpkin ale than the last one I brought on. This is just called Pumpkin Ale, and it's from Great Lakes Brewery. I would probably give it a drinkable rating. Will I drink it again? Maybe again around this time next year, but I'm not going to be holding my breath for it. It was it was a solid beer, 7 out of 10. It did the pumpkin notes, the pumpkin spice was there, and it wasn't disgusting like the last one was.
All right. Well, glad it was better than the one last week.
Yeah, the one last week, I think I described it as being watered down piss with dry hay inside of it. That's what it tasted like. It was.
We're getting some of the best beers now, and we're getting some of the worst. Micro brews, man. It's a shame.
Yeah. So Daniel, what have you been drinking today?
All right, so I have been trying to cut down on drinking sodas and cutting down on drinking beer. So what I have brought to the table is the finest of LaCroix. I have an apricot LaCroix.
Apricot LaCroix. Nice.
Yes, it tasted like someone burped apricot into water, and it's a quite pleasant draft. I would say definitely made in the last couple of weeks. Probably shipped in a dirty truck and then unloaded at a local giant eagle. So that's my review of my drink.
Excellent.
Sweet.
Excellent.
I like it.
Oh,
Drew.
Oh man.
Hit us, my man.
Yeah. So I am drinking a beer from Rally King Brewing Company in my hometown of Fort Collins, Colorado. It is a kettle sour rye saison brewed with blood oranges.
I think I know what some of those were.
And so it's a tart, fruity, very delicious. I didn't even realize when I bought this that it was Rally King. I'd actually had this beer before at their brewery, but it was just called Blood Orange Saison at the time. They have changed it, and the new name, which I thought was pretty appropriate for both a Robert Jordan book and specifically Warrior of the Altaii, is called Bloody Good.
Oh, all right.
Oh, yes. I like it. It's very quaint.
Yeah. Not the best beer that I've brought in. I don't think it quite rises to the level of some of my beers for the Fires of Heaven episodes. I don't know if I'm ever going to beat Wolf's Wedding, honestly.
I don't know, dude. Daniel, for the Shadow Rising Part 1, he brought on a beer. I think it was the Shadow Rising Part 1. He brought on a beer called Maiden's Kiss. I am not shitting you right now. He did that.
That's awesome.
I don't know how he does it.
Oh, I've told Rob I can't wait till we get to another book. It's probably going to be a little ways down the road, but I already have the beer sitting in my fridge. This beer was specifically brewed and named, and the art on it, everything is for this book. Like, the people who brewed it definitely read this book. It's titled the same thing as the book. Like, the artwork is the character from this book. Like, I'm so excited for that one. Brad, you're going to be so angry.
Yeah, on that note, Drew, I just found the beer I'm going to be using for, I think it's going to be Path of Daggers Part 2 or Part 3, if we're going to be doing 2 or 3 parts on that one. But depending on where that falls in the book, I've already got mine for the Path of Daggers. You're going to love this one too.
Oh, can't wait. But yeah, on that note, this has been episode 40 of the Inking Out Loud podcast.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're getting close to our 50th episode. We got to figure out what we're doing.
I'm honored to be on your 40th.
I am so honored that you would come on our show, Daniel. Thank you so much.
So next up, we will be diving back into the Wheel of Time. We'll be doing the first of 3 parts of Lord of Chaos. As always, if you're appreciating our content, check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/inkingoutloud. And we actually have another new announcement as of this morning. We have a website, www.iolpodcast.com.
Yeah, we do.
Our recurring special guest, Jared Livingston, did some awesome work for us on that. And it looks great. We're very excited to have that up, so go check us out there. And I am your host, Drew McCaffrey. As always, my co-host, Rob Santos.
Heyo.
And our very special guest, Daniel Greene. Thanks for joining us, Daniel.
Anytime, guys. I'm happy to do it. I don't know why I just waved. The listeners cannot see me.
That's just for us. That's just for us. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah. So, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.